Hi, friends. My name is Lou Gerlach with Think Chat, and I'm super excited to talk with you about one of my passion projects, which is creating a learner-driven library system where learners are sparking with curiosity and wonder because they have some agency within the space, with its design, with its usage, and with its experiences. I've been IB PYP teacher and coordinator for the past 15 years and have been an educator for the past 20. And one thing that I have found as I've been working within an inquiry and conceptual based system is that learners need agency. They need the freedom to be able to manipulate spaces for their own use. And this greatly applies to our library spaces because they have modified over time the usage, and it also has impacted our role as librarians. Now, while I was the PYP coordinator at my school, I also took on board being the head librarian, where I took our entire collection. And if you're a PYP teacher, you'll understand this, and explain it to those that are non-PYP. But I took the entire collection and sorted it according to the transdisciplinary theme descriptors, as well as genreification of the rest of the collection, made space for key concepts and learner profile attributes. So that is a lot, plus additional language resources so that students could feel like their language was valued within the library system. So for those that are not part of the PYP system, I basically took all of our collection and organized it by big overarching themes or ideas that are driven by conceptual understandings. There are 6 categories, and then the remainder of the books I genreified, created an early years collection, and then also looked at character traits and different big ideas that children are going to need in order to be able to understand how to connect to their learning. So we're looking to do this within a 3-part series. And the first part is all about looking at genreification. So as we look at this part, we're going to look at 2 strands as we look at agentic libraries. Agentic libraries, what they are, they're all about getting learners to drive the process. And first we have to look at our roles, not role, within the library and how they impact how much agency we have, but also impact the agency that learners have. As you can see here, we begin with talking about ourselves as an education researcher. Are we abreast of the current educational research related to our field, and how is that being applied into your library? Thinking about our role as a teacher librarian, how are you then curating experiences and sharing the love of literature aligned with best practice and the science of reading to build excitement and a love of reading? How are we then being an interior designer where we're designing flexible spaces for learners to engage, which impacts how we become a maker master? As we have flexible spaces, we're going to have place where we can then create and have our students create using a wide variety of maker tools. And another part, which is more, I would say, traditional, is being a literary expert. In regards to being a literacy expert, you are have to keep abreast of all the new books. What are new genres that are available? What are new manga series that are available? Graphic novels, whatever it might be, to evolve so it reflects a wider range of a reader. And then last but not least, a media specialist. We have to think about what are the things that are currently available in the marketplace and how are we leveraging them so that our students are prepared. This is big. That's just half of this guide. Woo wee. And then the other half is looking at the genres within this primary level library experience. Now, if you are a middle years librarian, don't worry. I'm working on curating this for a middle school setting so that it's more age appropriate. But there's going to be genre posters. So these are going to be overarching posters that encapsulate what this section of the collection is about. It's going to be poster size. And then we have for early years, oftentimes with early years, we want favorite authors, right? Like Eric Carle and Dr. Seuss. We also want favorite series like Clifford the Big Red Dog um, and Arthur and so forth. And as they go beyond that predictability, then they're ready for those I can read books or stepping stones, where it's a little bit more formulaic, but it's also a little bit more sophisticated in the length of the reading. We still have imagery, but it's a lot less. And now we're entering into the lane of chapter books, right? Second or third grade, where we're looking to engage with longer texts that still are somewhat predictable characterization, but allow the reader to read for a greater length of time. And as they become masters of these chapter books, as we know, then they engage with novels. And we are going to be talking about how we genreify novels in this process so that it feels kind of like a bookstore. All of this is going to feel like a bookshop experience where children can go and self-select tools to become more agentic. And then, of course, there's some reflections there for you to help you with the process of tips and tricks of things that I encountered as I went along my journey. So I want you during this process to think like a curator. Now, when we think about a curator, we're thinking about a person who takes the best bits of different experiences and different products and processes and puts them together to make meaning so that the learner is able to walk away from the experience feeling like they've had a breadth and depth of understanding. And this is a favorite quote of mine from Ideal Libraries, a guide for schools that was printed and distributed by the International Baccalaureate, or the IB, where they talk about librarians as curators of information, caretakers of content and people. But I also love this, catalysts of peoples and services and connectors to sources of information, multiliteracies, and reading. Now, we know that with anything in life, we need the best experience is that get the learners involved. So it's about co-creating this experience with our learners, getting their input on how they want this library experience to look and feel. So let's pop in right away of our role as an edu researcher. Now, as an edu researcher, we're looking at what are all the possibilities that we're going to take on in order to make this happen. Now, thinking about this, there's different ways where we can strengthen our practice, looking at strategies, ways of our personal growth and development, looking at challenges and the practices and potential of our learners, and also skill development. Now, there's multiple ways, but you cannot possibly, as a single librarian, be able to take all of this on. So I look at this as a choice menu, and I'm going to present multiple choice menus for you of where do you want to start? What is something that you can do with fellow librarians, but when you get back to your library space, you struggle a little bit. You already have a working understanding of it, but you just need some extra practice and refinement. That's how I goal set. So let's take a look at this list and think about where do you need to zoom in regards to yourself as an education researcher. So one of the things that, if you think about current educational research, has been about learner agency, which is what all of this guide is focusing in on. That's why we're talking about it first. So thinking about your choices as a school librarian, and from the lens of an education researcher. So one of the things to frame your mindset is as you are implementing new strategies and new tools and new practices into your library space, how are you doing that through the lens of learner agency? And this has been adapted from the work of Sonia Terberg, where she looks at there are 5 fundamental ways in which agency thrives or is blocked. Is looking at the structure of your timing and the engagements, is looking at the relationships that learners are building, not only with each other, but with the ideas themselves. How are they collaborating? So the difference is relationships is, yes, we're connecting, but it's about building the relationships with you and the student to the community, and collaboration is within those small groups. How are you helping that thrive? What are resources that you're using? Are you using a wide variety of read aloud materials that reflect multiple different types of genre? Or are you just doing the favorite picture books? Because that's something to consider. And then looking at your environment, once again, in regards to how flexible it is. So take a moment to pause this video and ask yourself, which one can I begin right away that I have a working knowledge of, but I still need some practice to make it happen, and work on it for the rest of this school year, and maybe even next year. Because, and some of us in the Southern Hemisphere have just begun school within about a month ago. Think about what you're going to take with you to go across the rest of the school year. So thinking about now as a teacher librarian, we've focused on being an education researcher, but now as a teacher librarian, even that role's expanded. We're now getting students to, initiate reading experiences because of how we've designed and curated our collection, our furnishings, how we've organized content, how we've provoked our learners to think about books differently. Like I love end caps when I come into books. I love top picks. I love where there's lots of highlighted sections because it helps children to connect with prior reading experiences. And the one thing that I love that a teacher librarian holds is the keeper of stories, memories, and identity. As a teacher librarian, really, you are curating what it feels and looks like in that library space and why reading is so fundamental to growth, which is why we have this kind of plant metaphor. You're sparking a lifelong passion of reading. And so thinking about that, how do we do that? Well, one thing that you can think about is how are you augmenting the way in which you deliver instruction to your learners? Because a big part of the role of a teacher librarian is instruction delivery. One thing that I've curated that I really love is called a Think Chat lesson cycle, where we're looking at how are we making the library experience more interactive. And this doesn't have to be every time, because obviously there are going to be times where you do makerspace, where you're varying out your activities. But thinking about this, my friends, how are you posing a question to get them sparked about discussing, and then maybe doing a warm-up activity that connects to that question. These 2 steps are all about getting some prior assessment on student understanding and curiosity. And because that's going to inform step 3, which is new information. In new information, it's literally that you're providing some new information for them to ponder and think about, and connecting it back to the question and the warm-up activity. Then you're going to give them some free time with some literacy activities to play with the ideas, to put them into practice, and then we'll have a debrief of a reflection. That could literally be about 4 to 5 minutes long. It doesn't have to be super long for it to be impactful. Now we're going to go into becoming an interior designer. Now, an interior designer, when I'm thinking about this role that we take on, is how are we then designing a space that's not only tangible, meaning that there's a lot of tools that are available. It's also a creative space where it sparks creativity. It's also flexible. The furnishings, the spaces are movable. It's also accessible. So it's accessible to early learners up to children with physical and emotional and learning disabilities, language acquisition, that there's space for everyone to feel like they have access, because we're always designing for universal access, and that it's also purposeful. So thinking about your interior design structure, a big part of that is, how do we have different cozy spaces, cushions, and some of the questions that I received on a survey is that I have a small library space, I have big bulky furniture. How do I make this work? Now you're going to have to possibly be a little bit more creative in how you have your bookshelves. One thing that I did in my school library is I had some of the bookshelves come out from the wall so that it allowed some space. But there also has to be ground rules of where and how students interact in the library space, so that we don't want foolishness happening outside of our site. But at the same time, we want to give some flexibility, that there's some cozy corners for learners to be able to engage with reading experiences. And now this goes on to a maker master. And the two are connected with creating that learning space design, where we're looking at, okay, we want to give opportunity for students to engage in making, but there's also got to be some safety rules, right? That has to be taught, that there's certain tools and procedures, and this is how we use them, because many of our learners might not know. So, and that making doesn't necessarily always have to be with somebody. There can be collaboration zones, but there also can be some quiet zones where students are making on their own. There might be some technology integration and a place for display and showcase. So thinking about this as a maker master, think about your current space and where are you going to allow this maker space to thrive. Maybe it's out in the hallway, and you have some tables and you have some loose parts and some bins, and you allow students to create. And once again, there has to be ground rules of what that looks and feels like before you release it into the hallway. Now, here comes the piece where we're looking at it from a literary expert. Literary experts are going to be looking at, how is the collection organized? This is where agency really thrives, because we have these things here. These are those big genre posters. They're going to tell children, okay, these are chapter books. And if you notice that there are different characterization here on these chapter books, and if you also notice that the characters look very similar, but not exactly like licensed characters, because we have to be mindful of copyright law, and that imagery is copyrighted. But through the advancements of AI technology, I've been able to curate some posters that look very close to the original characters. Some are not as close, but children are going to get an understanding of what they are. Now, depending on where you are in your library space, right here, you can see this little one of Clifford. This Clifford is for smaller little cubbyhole types of spaces. And this one right here with Frank Ash is going to be for larger shelves. These are end cap posters that help learners to be able to quickly identify who and what the topic is about. And so you can create this opportunity of shelving it so that it's cohesive. And here you can see this is like I can read in fiction. It continues, and then here's some examples of teacher resources of what they might look like. Now, this organization is completely up to you, but this is what I created so that it made sense to me. Um, but thinking about your library space, you're going to have to think about what is it that you want it to look like and how you want it to look like. Okay. So that's something to consider. And so as we're closing out this experience, we have to think about ourselves as a media specialist, right? And what are we looking at? We're looking at ebooks. We're looking at multimedia, right? We're looking at databases. So how do you organize and know your databases, whether it's Destiny or Excel or whatever it might be? What are the different platforms you use and apps that you use that comes into that multimedia piece, right? And obviously your literacy, understanding media literacy and media research. And so you're going to be the leader on this. So you need to know what your school or your district or um, your system has available and how to leverage it so that learners really understand this process. So that concludes, my friends, ideas about what I offer. I've created this guide in regards to looking at learner driven libraries. And I've created it solely for people who are saying, I love this idea. How do I make it happen? But I don't understand how to do the process. I need some help. As you can see, I'm on the last page, which is 143. So there's every poster known to man. But the thing that I always warn is that your collection at your library might not reflect the posters that I have, and that's okay. But I have been working in, I've done this process a couple times in different library spaces. And one thing I have noticed, my friends, is that there's a place for all. And no libraries need to look exactly the same. It's all about curating and figuring out what's going to be best for your learners, your space, and your collection. Now, you're probably walking away and saying, wait a minute, I don't get it. This is all about creating a learner-driven library space. Well, my friends, examining all of your roles creates more agency in your practice. As you are becoming more familiar with media literacy, you're able to then teach to students and allow them to self-select tools that best meet their needs. As you are going into your space design, you can include learners in that process and say, how should we redesign this library space that best meets your needs? And have a cross section of ages where we're talking and designing and planning together. Then looking at the collection, right, as a literary expert and saying, what are the books that most engage us? What kind of genres most engage us? Which ones do not at this time? And where do we need to buy more books that reflect the desires of our learners? That seems to be important. As a teacher librarian, I'd be asking my learners, hey, we're about to approach and learn about this idea. How can we best leverage the library to learn that experience? And how might that look so that it's more age appropriate and more interest driven? Through edu researching, you're going to be learning about a lot more opportunities and ideas out there in the marketplace that you hadn't considered, and then asking students which ones that they might want to do. So many possibilities in creating a more learner-driven library. I hope that this has helped you. Now, my friends, I hope that you'll create on your own a system that works for you. But for those people who are struggling, I have a guide that's created. You can go follow me on social media. You can also go to my website, which is thinkchat2020.com. And I do have a packet. I'm in the process of uploading a packet within the next week that will provide all of these materials ready made for you. The one thing that you must know is that this is a packet that is devised and personalized for your school. So you'll not instantly get a downloadable document. How it works is that you will get a document that you can download to understand. And then once you pay for the actual document, what will happen is in about a week to 2 weeks, working on a week turnaround, you'll need to send us your logo. And then what happens is after we receive your logo, we're actually going to put your logo on all the posters that get put up in your library. So it's personalized. It will have our ThinkChat logo next to your school logo, and your school logo will go first. And the reason why we want to do that is to ensure that the students realize that this belongs to your school and it doesn't belong to anybody else. And that matters when thinking about creating a library community that we want learner voice and that they feel like they're part of this process and curation of the collection. So I hope this has helped you, my friends, and I look forward to engaging you in the future.